Too many roles.
Too many roles. Rob Little, who's the head of planning for Crossrail.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. I'd like to start out the answer. My presentation up. Which is the slideshow button? Right. I'll introduce myself to start off. I've been involved in Crossrail for the last 6 years, quite long as I've hosted. My background is in project management, not just in the UK, but also in the Far East. I've worked in the rail industry for about the last 12 years in this country, so Thameslink. I've worked on the RTMS, which is the European control system for the railways. Yeah, so I've done quite a bit now actually in the rail industry. It's an interesting and different industry. It has lots of legacy sort of to deal with. Network Rail, if anybody's ever worked with Network Rail, then it's the easiest organisation to deal with. But Crossrail is, I would describe it as a breath of fresh air. It's a real opportunity to do something completely different, without the shackles of the rail industry. Very exciting, obviously tunneling underneath London. You don't get a chance to do that sort of stuff very often, so I've been delighted to be involved in Crossrail. It is a fantastic project. But in terms of planning Crossrail, so as I say, my background is in project management, so I'm a bit of a frustrated project manager, I suppose. But I do apply everything that I've learned in my project management experience, primarily in the Far East, to planning Crossrail. Here is a list of 10 things for successful projects. I didn't write that. I just googled successful projects, and that's what you get. Right? One of the first things you get. Right? It seemed like a pretty good list to me. But in there, number 3, manage the schedule. Then I'm fixed. I don't use those words, but managing the schedule, focusing on the schedule, fundamental to delivering any major project, well, whatever the size of the project. And Crossrail has been quite an interesting journey because it hasn't always done that. It changes with senior management, and now we have Simon Wright. I would say that he is, as the program director, I would say he's incredibly schedule focused, but Andy Mitchell, his predecessor, I would describe him as a sort of front-end kind of project director, very good at getting things through Parliament, all that sort of process, but actually, he's actually a planner by background. But he was not schedule focused, but Crossrail, I'd say, in the past 2 years, certainly since Simon's arrival, is a completely different place. We have, every 4 weeks, a schedule meeting. Our schedule is called the Master Operational Handover Schedule. We've had it for a number of years, 6 years since I've been involved. But we go through the programme and for an hour and a half every 4 weeks. That is a precursor to a series of project reviews, and it effectively gives that programme level view and backdrop for delving into the project to see how we're then supporting the delivery of the overall programme. So I just quickly let's just go through these items. So how strong centralised PMO? I think we have that. And certainly Rob give me some insight on that in terms of risk management. Excellent and efficient communications. I spend an awful lot of my time preparing presentations, not necessarily the detail. The detail, a lot of contractors do that. That's not what Crossrail really is about. The devil is in the deal, no doubt about it, but we're a client organisation and we need to understand the strategy of how it all fits together. And we do that all the time, spend a lot of time communicating that. Managing scope, yes, we're very tight in terms of managing scope. Scope of Crossrail hasn't really changed that much in 6 or 7 years. Lots of budget transfers between different projects and that type of thing, but I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of scope change. Co-managing with customers, so that's effectively TfL and the Department for Transport, the people PM, so good PM practices who are Bechtel and CH2 and Hill. I myself work for a small management consultancy called Nichols, slightly different, but anyway, having those project management culture and processes undoubtedly support a standardised delivery. Deliver really is about what Crossrail needs to do. Stakeholders is more about communications. The right resources, that applies to planning as any other part of the organisation. Get the best people you can possibly find, rule number one, and keep the executive management informed and engaged. So myself and my team, we prepare a standardised board presentation every period, so you can tell from that he's very schedule focused. He's constantly talking about the programme, constantly worried about the programme, but that's what the way he works, and which is great, because I think that's the right thing to do in terms of my background. You've got to hold the programme, and you've got to be very clear about what the objectives are. So how do we do it at Crossrail? I'll give you a bit of an insight. I'm not going into a huge amount of detail here about exactly how we do this, but there's a picture. There's we have multiple levels of schedules. That's what we call our level 0. I'm not intending to read it, but we have a one-page large A0 schedule which covers the entire scope of the project and the programme, and it covers everything there. So we'll say the master operational handover schedule. It's something, we update it every year and have done that for the past 6 or 7 years. We do that because by the end of every financial year, the whole thing is kind of, I wouldn't say bent out of shape, but the objectives change, things get re-engineered, so having an annual sort of refresh of your schedule is definitely a good lesson learned from Crossrail. But it includes an opening strategy. Simon talks about how we're going to sort of stitch it all together. It doesn't all happen on one day. There's 5 or 6 different big dates where we'll sort of do different bits and have 3 different parts of the railway working, so we'll join it all together. It includes, obviously, each station is typically a £250 million project. Systems, I don't know how much that's worth, £1 billion worth of systems. Signalling, tunnel ventilation, you name it, a whole bunch of those. Rolling stock and depot, although it's sort of financed separately and the government tries to, George Osborne tried to do it on balance sheet, we got that changed, but nevertheless we need to understand what's happening with rolling stock and depot, very exciting project, from Bardia, we've got a new depot out, although coming. We're spending a lot of time, as you might expect, looking at our testing and commissioning strategies. It's going to become the thing that we do nothing but testing and commissioning as we get into the last 18 months of the project. Network Rail, not the easiest organisation to deliver. They are good at doing what they normally do. You point them in a direction, they will deliver. They're good at doing track, they're good at doing platform lengthening. Anything novel or a bit different, they find it difficult. Changing organisation, culture is I would describe it as sort of being sort of hamstrung by all of legacy thinking. But anyway, it's a bit like a big oil tank. We tried to get them going off in the right direction. We knew they weren't necessarily going to perform, or because of the constraints that they have working around an operating railway. So there are some significant risks in that, but we did set their objectives, generally speaking, early, expecting them to underperform, which they have. Handover and operations. So we need to just we have an operations section in here. So Rail for London, our operator, or an infrastructure manager, and that's obviously a key part of it. What big projects fall over. We do all the infrastructure, we build the project, you get a deep dive, and then what happens is it all kind of fall over when it goes into operations. So there's a big focus on that. And obviously, you can expect me to stand up here and talk about schedules, and I'll talk about critical paths, so I'll come on to that in a little while, talking about just at a high level, just trying to understand what the critical paths look like. There are many, and they go off into various opening strategies, but nevertheless, I think we understand them very well. So our schedule exists, as I mentioned, in various levels, so truly strategic level, just high level, what are the objectives. Sectors it reflects the organisation of Crossrail, so we have sectors for stations, civils, and system-wide, or sort of headed up by individual delivery directors. And then within those, with systems, the sector, you will get various projects, signaling, communications, some ventilation, track, overhead line, power, and that sort of thing. And we use this, although obviously this is drawn in Excel, we use industry standard Primavera software, which is, it's great piece of software. I'm not going to go into the detail of exactly how we do it, but we've effectively got two levels. We have sector planners, we have projects, we don't blow up, we don't cost load, we don't do any of that, because a real fundamental thing in Crossrail is that we let planners, and I have a team of 50 planners, we let the planners plan, try to keep them out of costs, because cost loading schedules just end up in a hornet's nest of erroneous information and indicators as far as my experience tells me. Anyway, so standard software, which works very well. And here's just some of the challenges. None of these are going to come with any surprises to you, but it is obviously a very complicated project. But you can keep it simple. It is possible. I'm back to communicating. It's at all levels, at project level, but also getting stakeholder management, getting everybody aligned in terms of what our objectives are and how we're going to get there. It's fundamental. Clearly, we look at a lot of dependencies, particularly into projects. A lot of those are driven by contractual obligations and contractual interfaces. So we manage those. They're constantly changing as well. As the project moves through the life cycle, we have to get deeper into some of that. The devil's there, and we just have to manage that as you move through the project, and as your knowledge grows about how to manage the program. And there's an awful lot of it. Let's say so we've got a planning team of 50 to sort of give an indication of how much there is to integrate all together and determine the overall program. So I was going to illustrate just very high-level principles of what we do. That is a platform starting construction. This was a year ago. This is probably one of the first platforms we started building at Crossrail Road. I'm just going to take that out, but I'll just left it in. So it gives you an indication of how much we've moved. So Simon showed a similar photograph earlier on. That's Bond Street. Platform construction, platform right, so the structure above there. So, in determining one of our overall sort of critical paths, or program level critical paths, that's one of the ingredients. I'm going to come on to some of the others. So, we've got this thing called floating track slab. It's effectively some track which is made out of concrete, there's a track on the top of it, and it is effectively set on springs. We use this in two locations. It's because we have noise sensitive neighbours in and around Soho, and also because we tunneled right underneath the Barbican, into the Barbican's concert theatre. They don't want to hear Crossrail trains coming through there when they're listening to whatever symphony or music that's going on there. So it's very difficult to build, it's time consuming, it's slow, it uses mega dense concrete, if anyone knows what that is, very heavy to attenuate the noise and the vibration. I think we appreciate about 3 years ago that we needed to do something about this in terms of our overall program. It's really time consuming and a very slow process, and it's in really difficult sections of the tunnels, so right in the middle, where the access is probably the most difficult. And then we've got this concreting train. It's a mobile batching plant. That's a picture of it before it was refurbished. It was used on the Channel Tunnel railing. And that's what we're using to do our normal standard track slab, which is probably 95% of what we're building. So that's another ingredient. Then we need a testing and commissioning strategy. So that's our central operating section from Paddington down to Abbey Wood. Putting the lane, we identified 3 zones. So one of the things we realised with Crossrail a long time ago, although we didn't necessarily build it into the contract, was that a lot of this infrastructure was pretty straightforward to build. And we'd be there, finished and ready earlier than the difficult stuff, which is particularly around the stations here, and I mentioned the floating track slab, which is in these 2 locations in the middle. So we realised there was an opportunity there to get trains on early without necessarily having to do anything. It's just the infrastructure was going to be easier to build. So we built a testing and commissioning strategy around that. we went for this date of November next year. We're going to bring a train on there, so a new Crossrail train, get on that infrastructure, we'll start testing it together and do all these integration tests that we need to do. And then our target or our objective is that by the 2nd of January, we will extend it to the other areas of the programme. So it's really about taking the low-hanging fruit. So in terms of planning and graphics, so these graphics have worked well in terms of communicating at all levels in Crossrail. So a couple of years ago, if you look at time down here, this is a very simplified time change drawn in PowerPoint, and then from left to right, from Roller, Portal, Paddington, all the stations are along the top, through to Victoria Portal, and we come over to the surface here, Plumstead over here, putting the lane. We've got our floating track slab, that difficult bit of track, it's maybe all heavy concrete, right in the middle there, between Bond Street and Tottenham Court Road, and between Farringdon and Liverpool Street. And then in amongst that, we want to thread through our concrete and train activities. We set ourselves an objective of March 2017. We wanted all the track to be in, all the walkways at the side of the track, the overhead line. That's what we were trying to do. And at that time, we were trying to start our dynamic testing in April 2018. But what we wanted to do, and taking advantage of that opportunity to bring things forward, was to do exactly that. So, what we did, and this is all post-contract, is to, before I did that, our floating track, so I just moved there, that's because we lost our opportunity. We were trying to find ways of doing this early, get it onto the critical path, put it right back into the heart of the program, get in as early as we could. But that bit of floating track side moved, because we didn't have the opportunity to get down through Liverpool Street that we thought we might. And also what happened with all our platforms started running late. Really, that was just a sort of hangover from building the boxes for each one of the stations. And the impacts of that, there was contractual interfaces, there was contractors that built the boxes, and then there's the main contractor that gets on and comes on site and builds the platform. So you can see, we weren't going to get our concrete and train through Stepney Green, we weren't going to get it through Whitechapel or Liverpool Street, because that just wasn't going to happen. So we had to do a bit of a re-evaluation there. If this works. So we just sort of start breaking it down. And this is our concrete train coming through. Green is westbound, blue is eastbound tunnels. And again, so this starts impacting our floating track slab. This floating track slab, we've actually found a way of moving it up here. So we're constantly looking at these things, trying to hold our end dates. But it did break this line. So in March and April, what we did manage to do was to maintain our testing in zones 1 and 2 in November 17 and extending it through to January 2018 for that whole of the central section. But this is just an illustration of some of the sort of just high-level pictures and animations that we use to communicate planning information. So another way to do this, a lot of people don't like looking at Gantt charts, so we try to get people just a simple bit of animation just to look at our schedule. It works. So for our overall program critical path. So you see in the middle of Crossrail, so we've got critical path here that shows going through Farringdon, Liverpool Street, Whitechapel. This is all about building the platforms. And then we get into system-wide. It's all about really the interfaces here between each one of these stations. None of them are easy. Farringdon probably proved to be slightly easier than Liverpool Street and Whitechapel. Whitechapel, difficult contract, difficult contractual relationships. Stepney Green is the intersection between the two tunnels. And then we've got effectively just got all our system-wide installation into static testing, integration testing, in our early dynamic testing. But just even at that level, it's a very useful way to communicate the overall program and the overall objectives. Slightly different way of looking at it there. It just shows, because not only have we got systems that run through tunnels at each one of the stations, we've got about let's say 70 to 80 equipment rooms at each station for system-wide contracts, so communications, signalling, so tunnel ventilation, we've got shafts. All of these things create interfaces which we need to manage. So that's what all this M&E fit out is about. Creating those plant rooms, getting the system-wide guys in there to so that they can start building up systems and that need to communicate around back to our root control centre and send all that information back. So again, it's just a depiction of the overall programme critical path and an effective way of communicating what we're trying to achieve. So, talk about learning legacy. I'm not going to go into any of these in any detail, but we put together 4 micro reports in the film. One on managing and planning design, because you mentioned here before, managing design is not proved easy on Crossrail. How all these British companies have a great reputation for designing the Atkins, the Arabs, and all of those guys are all very good at what they're doing. What we're not necessarily very good at doing is managing them, particularly when you've got a tier 1 contractor, such as, I don't know, Dangle trying to manage an Arabs of the world. Doesn't work very well. And so arresting the slippage in those programs has been a real struggle for Crossrail. Reporting, managing interfaces and commodity monitoring. I mentioned that one there. Commodity monitoring is particularly important for all those that have done SPIs and CPIs and all that in the past. I think there's a far better understanding of how your project's doing. Just monitoring how we're doing in terms of our TBNs every day. We have a website, we have an intranet website where we still continue to publish daily reports on how we're doing with track. In the past it was kind of boring, but just picking off some key commodities in terms of what the plan is, what the forecast is, and how many we're actually doing on a daily basis, just gives a pulse on the project. And has worked very effectively, and all the directors in Crossrail put them every day. I'm waiting for that to pop into their inbox to see what we've done the night before, or the day before. So, obviously I'm here to promote the use of planning, the use of an integrated programme, and how that pays dividends. I think we do set very good levels of good industry practice on Crossrail. To answer the question that we made before, we have documented all our planning procedures on Crossrail. It's all on our planning website. It all goes actually into the learning legacy. You can see that's all. I think most of that should be freely available to see. So we've published all our secrets. But I think it's pretty good. It's as good as I've ever seen on any project around the world. It is quite difficult sometimes to get people to write down what they intend to do, whether that's a procedure or whatever, but in terms of planning, I think we've done a pretty good job. It's live, we just go straight into our website, and it's constantly evolving as well. So whenever we get a new thing that comes up, like automatic fare collection, we want all the planners for all the stations want to adopt a standard approach, some standard timescales. We write it down, put it in a desk of instruction, instruct it out to all our planners, who then the projects can take the view as to how far they want to instruct that down, but the communication is there for them to do that. But what happens without an integrated and realistic plan? I'm not saying Crossrail is perfect, but and we've got stresses and strains. It's not quite the way we would have seen things sort of necessarily 2 or 3 years ago, but we are constantly re-engineering the plan. But here's a good example. This is in Hong Kong, and that's the high-speed rail interchange down in Kowloon. Talk about Hong Kong because I used to work there, but it's something very close to my heart. So that's what happens if there is a report out there that says why that project has gone so badly. And one of the reasons for that is because they haven't had an integrated approach to planning, and they've been over-optimistic, and they've thought that they could do things that are frankly not realistic. So we've got a 3-year bust on their programme. But part of that, one of the things that their recommendations of the report written about 18 months ago is that they do focus, and they have to focus more realistically and be more open about their planning. So that's my message out there in terms of Crossrail, what we plan to do. Nobody's saying delivering Crossrail the last sort of 10 or 20% is going to be the hardest, no doubt about that. But having a clear plan through testing, commissioning, and finishing off all those systems is, as far as I'm concerned, a good methodology, a robust methodology will support that. So that's all I was going to say. I'm happy to take any questions if you'd like to.
Any questions? Questions?
Go on, I'll Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Yeah, so you talked planners on the project.
Yep.
In the last little bit of your talk, you were talking about like the planning fallacy, like the optimism bias aspect of
Yep.
in having repeatable processes against each station.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm just recognising that there are challenges with getting real data, output data, and is that going to feed forward, I suppose, into this future Crossrail 2 project, the output rates that were achieved and the realistic timescales?
I think that Crossrail is based on some pretty good information. The overall timescale set by studies or whatever they've done, generally speaking, based on historical information, past projects, and there's a lot of that good information out there. Where we struggle is that in this country is that we get bogged down by our contractual relationships. So we get schedules in from contractors which are all commercially biased. So we end up with their view, which is not actually what we're going to do. It's a commercial entitlement program versus what we, as a project, think we can deliver. So there's this tension all the time. But if the commercial position is not sorted out, we've not. It hasn't been Crossrail until about last year with a new commercial director who came on board, who was kind of cut through a lot of that. So we are a lot better aligned than we have been before. So we are seeing a lot more realism in the tier 1 contractors, but we're constantly fighting. And I think there's a healthy tension between the strategy. Sometimes it's top down, and sometimes it's bottom up. And our role in terms of planning is to make sure that everything sort of zippers up, and things don't necessarily. I know sometimes projects don't quite get it right. They don't necessarily understand what we're trying to do in terms of our testing and commissioning strategy, but that means that we need to spend more time communicating with them and making sure that they understand what we're trying to achieve as an overall strategy, what they need to do to support the train running, and which are those other sort of station systems which they can continue and have longer to do. So there's lots of discussions like that to make sure that people understand. I think a lot of it comes down to really understanding what the objectives are on both sides.
Rob,
Hi.
how does Crossrail rank for you compared to other projects you've worked on in terms of either enjoyment or frustration or that kind of thing overall?
3 major projects that I've worked on that have been absolutely amazing. Hong Kong Airport, it's fantastic, but they didn't do this in terms of planning. Not that I'm aware of. It's all very much milestones to have that culture of detailed planning. Things may have changed. That was quite a long time ago now. I worked on effectively building fibre optic networks around the world. That's very exciting. We'll fiddle that at the end. Crossrail, massively so. Top 3. So it's in my top 3. But it doesn't feel. I've worked in the Department of Transport, so it doesn't feel like a government project. So it has got the sort of the sort of healthy atmosphere that you can sort of do what you like, you're not constrained. So it's right up there. So it's really enjoyable. At times frustrating, but most of the time enjoyable. Very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Thank you. My question goes to the plans based on what you've achieved on this project, Crossrail 1. Do you think Crossrail 2 can significantly reduce the cost?
Reduce the costs.
Yes.
To be honest, I can't answer that question. So in Crossrail, from a planning function, we really have focused on planning. My view is get the planning right, deliver the projects, and the costs will kind of sort themselves out. I can't say that in terms of I'm not really involved so heavily really in the cost side of it, but I think if we have a realistic plan that's deliverable, then that's really my objective for the programme, to have that in place.
Anybody else? No?
So overall, hitting KPIs across the whole project time, the contractors, has that been quite successful compared to the original plan?
In terms of scheduled delivery, no, I mean, we're not where we want to be. A good example of that is all the equipment at all the stations. So we wanted, really, we deliberately set these early, sort of 3 years ago. So by April now, we wanted all our equipment rooms handed over. We haven't done that. There's going to be a spread of days between now and the end of the year. Some of them will go into next year. I say we're constantly re-engineering how we think about projects, but we are conscious, and we have consciously set early deadlines, knowing that things weren't going to go quite the way we intended to. So things do creep to the right, but I think we've been smart enough to recognise some early opportunities to get trains on the infrastructure in the east. So that will certainly de-risk our testing and commissioning. There's even an opportunity to run service down there if Crossrail wanted to, and if the operator wants to. We could do that early as well. So there's constantly opportunities, but I would always sort of prescribe to the